Welcome to KCA Production, bringing you stories that teach, inspire, and correct. Please do subscribe to KCA Production for more amazing stories. Today, we present Dark Morning. The evening was calm, the kind of calm that made everything feel predictable. The sun had already begun its slow descent, casting a warm glow across the village. People moved about their routines, finishing up the day's work, preparing meals, and settling into the quiet rhythm of night. Inside one of the modest homes at the edge of the village, Tunde sat casually, sharpening his spear without much attention. His movements were careless, almost distracted, as though the task itself did not matter much to him. Across from him, his father watched silently for a moment before speaking. "Tomorrow morning," he said, his voice steady and firm, "we go into the forest before sunrise." Tunde nodded without looking up. "You must be ready early," his father continued. "The forest is not a place to enter carelessly, especially when the light is low." This time, Tunde looked up briefly, meeting his father's eyes. There was seriousness in them, the kind that came from experience. But Tunde only nodded again. "I understand," he said. His father held his gaze for a moment longer, as if trying to confirm that the message had truly been received. Then he stood and stepped outside, leaving Tunde alone with his thoughts. But Tunde was not thinking deeply about what had been said. To him, this was routine, a simple instruction, something he had heard before. In his mind, there was absolutely nothing to worry about. He had entered the forest many times. He had hunted alone before. He believed he understood enough. What he did not realize was that experience without discipline can be dangerous. Later that night, as the village settled into silence, Tunde lay on his mat, staring at the ceiling. He was not thinking about the warning. He was not thinking about caution. Instead, he thought about how quickly he could finish the hunt, how he could prove once again that he was capable of doing things on his own. Slowly, but eventually, sleep came, and with it, the beginning of a morning that would change everything. Tunde woke up suddenly. There was no clear reason for it. No sound, no disturbance, just a strange feeling. He sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes as he tried to adjust. The room was dim, not completely dark, but darker than it should have been at that time. He turned toward the window. The sky outside was heavy with thick clouds. No sunlight, no brightness. Just a dull grey darkness that stretched across the horizon. It felt unusual. The kind of morning that made everything slower, quieter, and heavier. For a moment, Sunday sat still. Something inside him hesitated. A small voice telling him to pause, to rethink, and remember what his father had said. But instead of listening, he stood up, looked around the room. His father was gone, already left the early hours of the morning. The moment Tunde stepped past the edge of the forest, something shifted. He had decided he would still go even after his father had left. The warning his father had given the previous night rang in his head, but he refused to think about it, ignored it, and went out into the forest. It was not something he could see immediately, but something he could feel. The air inside the forest was different this morning, heavier than usual, even cooler. It carried a stillness that did not exist outside of the forest. The trees stood tall and close together, their thick branches stretching outward and overlapping, forming a canopy that blocked most of the already dim morning light. What little brightness remained filtered through in faint streaks, barely touching the ground. Tunde paused for a moment. His eyes adjusted slowly. The path ahead was unclear, covered with fallen leaves and shadows that blended into one another. He took a step forward, then another. Each movement deeper into the forest made the outside world feel more distant. The sounds of the village were gone. Sounds of children playing from around were gone, replaced by silence, an empty one. Tunde noticed it. He noticed how quiet everything had become, how the usual sounds of birds and animals were missing, and even the unnecessary fog in the air. How even the wind seemed to move differently, brushing against the leaves in slow, uneven patterns. For a moment, he hesitated. His grip tightened slightly around his spear. Something inside him spoke yet again. Not loudly, but clearly enough to be felt. A warning. A reminder of his father's words. The forest is not safe. especially when the light is low. But Sunde pushed the thought aside. He had come too far to turn back. And in his mind, there was nothing here he could not handle. So he continued, step by step, moving deeper into the forest. The ground beneath his feet shifted slightly with each movement. Dry leaves cracked softly. Small twigs snapped under pressure. Every sound he made felt louder than it should have been, as though the forest itself was listening, watching, waiting. Tunde slowed down again. This time, not out of caution, but because the darkness ahead made it harder to see clearly. Shapes began to blend together. The outlines of trees looked like moving figures from a distance. Shadows shifted with the slightest movement of leaves. His eyes tried to adjust so hard, but the environment made it difficult. Still, he did not stop, because in his mind, stopping meant doubt, and doubt was something he had never allowed himself to accept. He moved forward again, deeper, further, until the forest around him felt completely unfamiliar. And yet, he kept going. It happened in the moment, the kind of moment that feels unreasonable, small, but carries consequences far greater than expected. Tunde had just taken another step forward when he heard it. A sudden movement, quick, sharp, close enough to trigger an immediate reaction. His body responded before his mind could catch up. His muscles tightened and his focus narrowed. Every instinct he had developed through years of training activated at once. In his mind, there was only one assumption: a target, something to strike, something to act on. Without thinking, without pausing, without confirming, he moved. His hand gripped the spear firmly. His arm pulled back with precision. His eyes locked onto the direction of the movement. And in one fluid motion, he threw it. The spear cut through the air with speed and force. It was a perfect throw. The kind he had practiced countless times. The kind that never failed him before. For a brief moment, there was silence. Then came the sound. A sound that did not belong. Not in that moment. not in that situation, not in that place. It was not the cry of an animal, not the struggle of prey, but something else entirely. A human voice, sharp, sudden, filled with pain. Tunde froze instantly, his body locked in place. His breath stopped halfway. His mind struggled to process what he had just heard. For a moment, he stood completely still, as if moving would confirm something he was not ready to accept. But the silence that followed made it clear. This was not a mistaken sound. This was real. And whatever had happened could not be undone. Tunde did not move, not immediately. His body remained frozen, as though the forest itself had suddenly tightened around him, holding him in place. The sound he had just heard echoed faintly in his mind, not loud anymore, but present enough to unsettle him. His chest rose slowly as he tried to take in air, but even that felt difficult. Something was wrong, deeply wrong. For a brief moment, his mind searched for another explanation. Anything, just anything, that could replace what he was beginning to suspect. But there was nothing. No other sound followed. No movement. No sign that this was anything other than what it felt like. Slowly, he forced himself to move. One step, then another, each step heavier than the last. The ground beneath his feet felt unfamiliar now, as though he was walking on something unstable. The silence of the forest had changed. It was no longer empty. It was filled with tension, thick, pressing against him from every side. Tunde moved carefully toward the direction where the sound had come from. His eyes strained to see through the darkness. Every shadow now felt like something more. Every shape seemed uncertain. His heart began to beat faster, not from fear of danger, but from fear of truth. The closer he got, the more he felt it. That heavy, sinking feeling in his chest. The kind that tells you something has already gone wrong. Something that cannot be corrected. Finally, he stopped. Just a few steps away from where his spear had landed. He did not step forward immediately. He could not, because in that moment, he already knew. But knowing and seeing are not the same. Seeing is simple confirmation of what he already knew. Slowly, he forced himself to look, and what he saw removed every remaining doubt. His breath caught in his throat. His eyes widened, as if refusing to accept what was in front of him. The world around him seemed to fade away. The trees, the shadows, the forest itself, all disappeared into the background. Because lying there, motionless, was his father. Tunde's knees weakened instantly. He staggered slightly, as though the ground beneath him had shifted. His hands trembled at his sides, not from the cold around, but from something else. Something he had never felt before. His mind refused to process it fully. It even tried to reject it, to reshape it into something else, something less real. But reality does not change because we resist it. It remains exactly as it is, as it should be. And in that moment, the truth stood before him, clear, unavoidable, final. Time did not stop, but it no longer moved the same way. Every second felt stretched, and every moment carried a weight that made it difficult for Tunde to breathe. Tunde stood there, staring, unable to move forward, unable to step back. His thoughts were scattered, disorganized, refusing to settle into something he could not understand. He tried to make sense of it, to find the reason, to find some explanation that would somehow make these moments less severe. But there was none. No confusion, no misunderstanding, no possibility that this was anything other than what it was. His father had taken a different path into the forest, moving quietly, just as he always did. Careful, observant, disciplined. And in that same forest, in that same dark morning, Tunde had entered without caution, without awareness, without discipline. He replayed the moment in his mind. The sound, the reaction, the throw, over and over again. Each time, having the same result. And with each repetition, the realization grew clearer. This was not an accident caused by chance. It was a result of choice. His choice. He had been warned. He had been told to be careful. He had been given guidance, and yet he had ignored it. Not because he did not understand, but because he believed it did not apply to him. That belief, that confidence, that refusal to pause had led him here to this moment. Tunde's hand slowly tightened into fists, not out of anger, but out of something heavier, something harder to define. Regret. The kind that settles deep within you. The kind that does not fade quickly. The kind that stays. Because there are moments in life where you understand too late. And this was one of those moments. He finally stepped forward, slowly, carefully. But every step felt meaningless now. Because the outcome was already decided. The lesson had already been given. And the costs had already been paid. Tunde's knees gave way beneath him. He dropped slowly, not out of weakness, but because his body could no longer hold the weight he felt inside. His hands hovered in front of him for a moment, unsure of where to go, what to do, or how to respond. Everything felt distant and unreal, as though he had been pulled out of the world he knew and placed somewhere unfamiliar. His breathing became uneven, shallow at first, then deeper, as though he was trying to steady himself, but there was no balance to return to, no normal to regain, because something irreversible had happened and he was at the center of it. His mind began to replay everything again, not just the moments in the forest, but everything that led to it. The conversation the night before, the warning, the instruction, his response, his attitude. Each memory came back with clarity now. Not blurred, not distant, but sharp and undeniable. He saw himself as he had been, careless, unnecessarily confident, unwilling to listen. And now, he saw the result of that version of himself. The weight of it settled heavily on his shoulders. Not something physical, but something just as real. Something he could feel in every part of his body. This was not something he could escape. Not something he could shift onto someone else. Definitely not something he could forget. It was his action, his decision, his responsibility, and now it was his burden to carry. The forest around him remained silent, unchanged, unaffected, as though nothing had happened at all. But for Tunde, everything had changed. The way he saw the world, the way he understood his actions, the way he would move from that moment forward. All of it was different now. Because sometimes it only takes one moment, one decision, one action to carry a weight that lasts a lifetime. someone who understood the weight of action. The people around him began to notice the change. The way he spoke less, but listened more. The way he moved carefully, but confidently. The way he no longer rushed into situations, but approached them with thought. They did not know what had caused the change, but they saw the results. And for Tunde, that was enough. Because the lesson he had learned was not one he needed to explain. It was one he lived. The memory of that morning never left Tunde. Did not fade with time. Did not become distant or unclear. It remained sharp, present, constant. Not as something that held him back, but as something that guided him forward. There were moments when he would stand at the edge of the forest, looking into the same path he once entered without thought. Same place where everything had changed. And each time he paused, not out of fear, but out of understanding, because he knew now that every action carries weight. Every decision has a consequence, and every moment, no matter how small, has the potential to change everything. As time passed, younger hunters began to follow him, watched how he moved, how he observed, and never acted without first understanding the forest. One day, a young boy approached him curious, observant, wanting to learn. "Why do you always supposed to listen?" the boy asked. "Why don't you just act when you see something?" Today looked at him quietly, not because he did not have an answer, but because he understood the weight behind the question and the answer he was about to give. Then he spoke calmly, clearly, because one moment is enough to change everything. The boy frowned slightly, not fully understanding, but Tunde did not explain further. Some lessons cannot be taught with words alone. They must be understood through time, through experience, through awareness. Tunde turned and began to walk again, slow, steady, intentional, because he had learned something that would stay with him forever. That discipline is not just about control, it's about responsibility. And that is the patience he also learned with the experience. He learned that patience is not weakness, it's protection. And the awareness is the difference between a mistake and a decision. Because sometimes it only takes one dark morning, one careless action, one moment without thought, to create a consequence that lasts a lifetime. And that is why we must learn to pause, to think, to understand before we act. Thank you for watching Dark Morning. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to KCA Production for more powerful and inspiring stories.